I'm going to bring on our very first speaker, Kathryn Goldstein. She is the founder and CEO of the Double Shift podcast. And Kathryn is an amazing friend. Many of you know her. She writes for a number of of major magazines and major articles. She is also the brainchild of the Care Corp, which I've been really excited about. We've created an amount of we've created a group outside of the Mother Honestly group to really talk about how can we provide the framework and the structure that caregivers need to thrive in and beyond the pandemic. So thank you so much, Kathryn, for joining us. Next, I'll bring on Sarah Maskop. Sarah is the co-founder and CEO of Winnie. And Winnie is a platform that connects parents to childcare. And I am so excited to have Sarah on because she is a champion for women. She's a champion for working parents and working mothers everywhere. Sarah, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I also want to bring our last guest, Shadia Sigala. Shadia is the founder and CEO of Kinside, a platform that connects employers to childcare. And so we're taking a very, very comprehensive approach to bringing together childcare tech innovators that are currently putting together sustainable solutions that can provide these kind of support that we need today for working families. So without further ado, we're going to kick into just general introductions. So I'll start off with you, Kathryn. Can you just give us a brief introduction into who you are and why the childcare crisis means so much to you right now? You're on mute.
Can you hear me? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm Kathryn Goldstein. I'm the creator and host of the Double Shift podcast, which is a show about a reported podcast about a new generation of working mothers, and I'm a journalist. And I cover the social and economic issues facing working mothers. So as you can imagine, it's just really been a year full of material in terms of things to cover. This is something that I've been researching and reporting on for a couple of years. And personally, I think I like to joke that I'm truly living my art right now. I had twins in February. So the ideas around caregiving and what needs to change in our society has been very, very front of mind as I sort of gone through this huge family change, in addition to seeing all of the extremely troubling fallout of the pandemic. I have a child in virtual kindergarten, so I'm living our government and society's complete abandonment of families, and I have a lot to say about that. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, for joining us. Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a brief introduction into who you are and why the childcare crisis is so important to you right now. And you're on mute as well, Sarah.
Gosh, I'm getting used to every new interface. It takes some getting used to, but and I'm also having my first coffee in the morning because it's very early here on the West Coast. So hey, I'm Sarah. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Winnie. Winnie helps parents find daycare and preschool. We have a platform with over 200,000 licensed childcare providers. And so we kind of have unique insight into how this crisis is affecting providers. And then also we have over 500,000 parents that come to Winnie every month and find daycare and preschool. So we see how this is impacting parents. And I would say like my overall theme is this was already a crisis before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just taken this into kind of the next level crisis, and it's top of mind for everyone. I'm super glad we're talking about it, but we can't forget that childcare
was already really underwater. The industry was really hurting even before the pandemic.
Absolutely. I think you definitely bring up a great point, saying that the childcare was already a crisis before the pandemic, especially safe and affordable childcare. So thank you so much for the work you do, because it has never been more important than now. Shadia, thanks for joining us. I know it's super, super early for the West Coast, and I want to apologize in advance for having to get you ladies up early. But can you introduce yourself and what Kinsight does?
Hi everyone, Shadia here from Kinsight. It is so early that my children are still at home. I did plop them in front of an iPad, so who's not doing that? So they will probably come barreling in at some point. And yeah, so look, let's just start with the first why I care. I'm living this problem. I'm a mother of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. Thank goodness they are still in preschool age. So they are going to preschool now, but they weren't for many months. But of course, the situation is still fraught. There's a lot of precautions that the care providers, especially in group settings, are taking. But like, that's me. I am. So the second part is that I'm an actual customer of my own service of Kinsight. Kinsight is an app that connects parents to daycares and preschools nationwide with preferred rates and priority spots. Now, from our perspective, but I would totally agree with Sarah. This was already an emergency, and then the pandemic made it like an apocalypse. And then what we're seeing from the employer side and the perspective that I would love to talk about during today's panel is that we're about to have a triple, mega, double emergency in the next few months, like towards the end of the year, early year, because employers and the economy will be ready to resume their engines, but the childcare industry will have been decimated. And so parents and mothers particularly will be faced with, yay, we're going back to work, but where is the childcare? And so we're about to, for me, unfortunately, I think we're about to see, we haven't seen the worst yet in the childcare crisis.
Thank you so much, Shadia, for that. I think you're absolutely right, that there's a crisis looming, and that actually leads me to our very first question, because we all saw the Women in the Workplace reports that came out this week, and some of the reporting was shocking. But I think what really stood out to me was that for the first time in 6 years, women more than men intend to leave the workforce, and many of them do not intend to return. And so the question that I have, and I think I can start with Kathryn, is what role does the childcare crisis play in this, and in women leaving the workforce? Because there's a whole bunch of different factors that we've identified, which is the caregiving, the childcare, the inability to combine the work and family. But what exactly is the role of childcare in this statistics that shows that women are intending to leave the workforce in greater proportion than men?
So I think a really important piece of this is not just all of a sudden, schools are going virtual or daycares are closed, so women are leaving the workforce. It's basically the result of decades of failed public policy that have led us to this moment. So we live in a country without paid family leave. So we also, paternity leave is basically still a very rare sort of luxury benefit for most people in this country. So men who take paternity leave and spend a lot of time with their children when they're born are much more likely to be involved with their children up to age 6. Has a huge impact on the father's level of involvement. Because there's not substantial paid leave and maternity leave, women are often having to take unpaid time off, which leads them to often have less advancement in their careers after they have children. So a lot of times, we hear a lot about these ideas of, the wage gap between men and women, the wage gap, women and men. the wage gap is actually a wage gap between mothers and everyone else. It's not really about women and men. It's about mothers and everybody else, because mothers earn substantially less than even women without children. And there's even bigger gaps between different groups of mothers of color. So if you have an economic crisis and you realize one parent may have to leave their job or has lost their job or has to deal with childcare, all the forces that have led us to this moment, including the fact that women are earning less, they have taken a more flexible job because in the past they had to be the one that picked up the kids from school or dealt with the teacher work days or whatever. They're going to be more likely to say, if you have two incomes and the woman has made less because of these systemic forces, it's going to be more likely that they're going to have to, and I refuse to say the word dropout, because I think that makes it sound like mothers are unmotivated teenagers. I would like to say forced out a window several stories down in terms of what is happening to their careers. So I think it's really important to understand this context. So the fact that school is virtual, and I think anyone who's doing virtual school understands that to be a hellscape. And we're not being given paid time off to do that. And given these things, and I think a lot of people thought this was a short-term thing, like let's just power through 1 month, power through 2 months. Like this is a long-term haul, and I think a lot of companies and our government have come up with no plan for addressing this.
Yeah, I'll just add that we have data. We've done studies on this at Winnie that when childcare is hard to come by, either because it's hard to afford, hard to find high quality, whatever the reason, it's women who disproportionately drop out of the workforce. It's mothers. And so it's no surprise that this is happening. And sorry for the word dropout, forced out of the workforce. And so it's no
we all have to work together.
Yeah, this is happening now in large numbers.
A 5-story building.
Yeah. I guess the thing I would add to that is what we know is that parents tend to make really short-term decisions for something that should be a very long-term decision. So if you in your family are thinking about, oh, I earn less as the woman, I should be the one forced out of the workforce to deal with virtual school or finding childcare, or the fact that, I have to pick up the kids early. Like make a decision that's a little bit longer term. Realize this is a moment in time, and even these early 0 to 5 years when your child is in childcare do not last forever. And so you may have to make an upfront investment. You may have to pay money for daycare or preschool that equals your salary or is maybe more than your salary. But you are making a longer term investment in your career. And I wish more families had that mindset when they are choosing to be forced out of the workforce to afford childcare, or because childcare is harder to come by.
Absolutely. I think you definitely bring up a lot of great points. First of all, Kathryn, thank you so much for using that word forced out, thrown out of the window, you don't matter description, because I think that's exactly what's happening. I think even beyond, the wage gap, beyond everything else that is happening, women are being forced out just by the perception that they are distracted, that they're not performing. We've heard from a lot of women as well in our community saying, hey, I was discriminated against, or my employers ran out of patience with me because, they keep hearing the kids in the background, or because, I wasn't on time with a deliverable, or just because of the perception that I'm a working mother. So there's a whole bunch of different factors affecting women, being forced out of the workforce. As we are seeing right now, I believe the number is 40% of working parents have left the workforce or have reduced their working hours. So I'm gonna come to Shadia and just, very quickly talk about, what are we seeing in terms of childcare, especially for kids beyond the 5 years of age, right? Because, we know that from 0 to 5, it's almost like a preschool setting. The kids are not exactly in a, in a public classroom. There isn't, certain expectations. They can still be home. But what we're seeing now is that a lot of older kids are either virtual schooling, hybrid schooling, and so there's a need for a different kind of childcare. What are you hearing from your network on how families are dealing with this, unique situation of having to care for kids above, school age kids right now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm going to agree with Kathryn, and everyone, it's just, people are at the breaking, there's no good answer. I don't know. It is incredibly hard. I actually call it the triple shift. And Kathryn, if you could please TM that and make a podcast because we know about the double shift. The triple shift is now that mothers primarily, but of course parents in general are at their breaking point, and mothers a little bit more or significantly more. The triple shift is, and I'm homeschooling in parallel to working and typing and sending emails, if I even have the luxury of working from home, right? So this is just a conundrum that every person, every family is facing with school age kids, and absolutely nobody has any good answers to it. Interestingly, employers, we basically sell into employers every day, and we say, hey, wouldn't you love to help your working parents with their childcare needs? And, we went from, having pretty good traction, and employers were saying yes, let's have the conversation. We've gone from every employer said, absolutely, cool topic, let's have the conversation. But they do not have a line item in their budget. Like that purchasing decision is brand new to them. And so whenever you introduce something new to a company, or especially an HR team, where you have certain benefits that look and sound like benefits that we all know about, when you think about childcare as a programmatic and structural policy and benefit system in a company, it's like a brand new chapter in the book. So what I see now with employers is that they are starting to, first of all, have the conversations, have them in a very intentional way. And the second question they ask is, what about the school age kids? Because all of our parents are working from home and doing the remote. And unfortunately, no one employer can solve that. And it really is just, this is just a complete policy, societal, and structural breakdown that we're all experiencing. But what I would suggest, rather than just say the obvious, which is this is hard and everyone's out on a limb, is to suggest what we do at KINSA is we suggest very specific policies and programs that employers can take to at least make this really difficult time a little bit more bearable, right? So it's not just about childcare or for school age kids or little kids. It's about paid family health insurance. It's about paid leave for new babies and family leave and sick leave. There's childcare assistance and so on. And I'd be happy to share the resources in a different way afterwards. But there are ways, like right now, no one employer can solve it, but we collectively, if many employers and the government, state government stepped in, I think that we could at least make the situation that is really untenable a little bit more bearable. But I mean, we have decades of debt built up. And so unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. There's no one intervention that's going to make this easy on parents or easy on women.
One of the cool things we've seen with our provider network is many of these providers, especially smaller in-home providers, so in-home daycares that are licensed and regulated by the state, are kind of flexing their business to take on school-age kids and support their distance learning. These businesses have been hit incredibly hard by the pandemic, and so they need new business as well. And they also see themselves as members of the community that want to pitch in and help out parents. So we do see that daycares and preschools are taking school age kids. And some of them, like some of the bigger centers, are actually have opened full-on learning labs to support distance learning. So it's pretty amazing to see how quickly a lot of this innovation has happened. And something that is, childcare is kind of a slower industry to make progress, and kind of overnight, lots of providers have kind of stood up new lines of business and innovated in terms of, their online offering, how they reach parents. So that has been kind of a bright spot in my view.
Sarah, what have you seen around learning pods? That's another thing that parents themselves are just saying. I mean, I think that like the power of the collective and the community has come full force, where parents in a certain neighborhood or school will sit, like 3 or 4 of them will band up and say, well, let's rotate the kids around our houses. And maybe the parents are doing the instruction, maybe they hire an outside instructor. But I wonder if you're seeing that, Sarah, in an organized fashion.
Yeah, we just did a big survey of over 1,000 parents and asked them, what did you do for childcare before the pandemic? What are you doing now? What do you plan to do through the end of the year? And learning pods, for the amount of press coverage and national attention they've gotten, are used or intend to be used by 8% of families. So it's pretty small. I think it's an awesome, again, innovative solution. I love that people are trying new things. And as a parent myself to 3 kids, like, I'm willing to try anything to try to get them socialization, education, and care. So not knocking on the pods, but they're out of reach for most families, even beyond issues of affordability. Logistically, they're very complex to set one up. With me, all the resources in the world, I couldn't figure out how to set up a pod for my kindergarten age daughter. So I can understand why only 8% of families are using or intend to use one.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think you've touched on great points on around the pods and everything that is happening with childcare and the childcare crisis. Sarah, I want to stay with you a little bit, because I really want us to get a better understanding of the caregivers. So the childcare centers, what are you hearing from them in terms of availability, in terms of the readiness to serve parents, in terms of, even the, are parents responding? Are parents bringing their kids back? What are some of the things you're hearing? I mean, we talk a lot about the childcare crisis, but what are childcare centers doing right now to prepare themselves for parents coming back?
Yeah, so the daycares and preschools have been open since like late April, and they're pretty much all up and running now. They don't have any, public assistance for the most part, and so they need to be open to stay in business. And all states across the country have said that childcare can operate for everyone. So they're back in business. They're up and running. They are hurting. They've lost a lot of business. Is that my internet is bad? I can tether to.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay.
So I think Blessing is having a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes when the kids in the neighborhood virtual learn, it takes down my internet, which is wonderful. But childcare providers are hurting. Another bright spot for parents is if you had a program you were looking to get into, they probably have a spot now. There is more capacity in the system than ever before. So great time to enroll in that coveted daycare preschool you might have been on the wait list for. Childcare providers are working hard to take a lot of safety precautions. We now collect that data on Winnie for every childcare provider, what COVID-19 health and safety measures they're taking. Some are doing nothing. Some are doing, full-fledged testing, staff for masks for staff and kids. So depending on what you're looking for, your level of comfort, you can probably find a provider that's taking precautions that would meet your needs.
I would just add really quickly, and I think evaluating whether or not to send your kids back to daycare has been a really fraught topic for so many parents with young kids. And I would just really encourage people to look beyond like the really sensationalist headlines you see about, COVID infections in schools and daycares, and try to look at sort of as much, sort of clear data. Emily Oster is a professor at Brown who's been collecting a bunch of information on school and daycare COVID rates. A lot of times they'll say like 1,000 kids in California have gotten COVID from daycare, but then they don't say out of how many kids. Like it can often be a very, very, very low number. So, good. Emily's Oster study was with Winnie. So it sounds like those
you
are.
You can find the results on Winnie's blog, winnie.com/blog. But yeah, like the rates of infection in kids in daycare is super low, lower than the general population. And then in staff, it's also lower than the general population, which basically shows daycare and preschool is not typically a source of spread. But of course, people in the community can get infected and bring it in wherever they go, including daycare and preschool. So you definitely want to make sure your child care center is taking appropriate precautions. But if they are, you can feel pretty safe going to childcare. And, I'm sending my kids. So I speak from what I'm willing to do with my own children.
Yeah. So I just think it's really important to sort of get beyond the sort of panic social media posts and the sensationalist news articles to really look at, try to make a decision about whether or not it's safe for your family.
Absolutely. So Kathryn, while I still have you, let's talk about, how we can create a much more larger scale social change beyond negotiating our own individual situations. Because for me, I'm like, oh no, I am not going anywhere. I'm home. But that doesn't mean that, I cannot support, a much more grander effort to move us forward collectively as a society. What are some of the, what are some larger scale social changes that are happening right now that we can support? And how are those changes going to affect, where we are right now in terms of childcare, in terms of women in the workforce?
So the most salient point that I have come to over the last couple of months of thinking about these issues in the context of the pandemic is that we are not going to see significant movement on this if this is only a women's issue. If it's only a problem for women, nothing will change. And so I would like to challenge and inspire everyone listening and watching to wake up every day and think, how can I make this a problem for a man? How can I make this a man's problem? Now, that man can be your husband. That man can be your boss. That man can be the CEO of your company. That man can be the mayor of your town. And if you find a man that you can make this a problem for, we will start to see a much, much different conversation. And ways that can look like is, things that can look like is advocating for childcare credits. That seems like basically giving parents money to pay for childcare is basically the quickest fix solution that I have seen. Setting up a Patagonia style daycare probably takes years. And a lot of these efforts, like for example, getting better paid family leave, when everything has gone really well at certain companies, that takes 9 months to a year. Like corporations aren't always very nimble with this sort of stuff. But if the man who's in charge knows that there is a group of people who is not going away, who's asking all the time that they need this and they're not accepting no for an answer, that is going to be a powerful force. That is no longer your problem, that is his problem. And I'm not saying that this is the easy way. I'm not saying this is the most peaceful way. I'm not saying that this isn't going to this could get you fired and divorced, but I'm saying if you're interested in creating large scale social change, this is what we have to do. So I'll stop there. That's my seed of revolution.
Yeah, Kathryn, can
I was getting worried. Okay, but to be very honest, my kids are downstairs, and we have an open floor plan, so they can hear me. So they are both screaming. My husband is on a work conference call, and so it's everyone's problem here. And I think Sarah has a similar type situation. But I do appreciate you saying that about making this a man's problem. And I'm gonna stop talking because my husband is also talking. But very, I love how this is happening in real time. Very quick question for everyone. One of the questions that came up from our audience is, how can we deal with the uncertainty with school and childcare right now? What are some of the tips and advice you have for working moms who are handling, their kids are in daycare, but they're not sure, if tomorrow COVID-19 is going to hit that daycare center? What are some of the ways they can deal with that? What are you guys hearing and seeing from your network?
I'll take this one first because it ties into what Kathryn was saying. My hot tip. There is no more powerful the man than the corporation, so the employer-based system. The employers are at the crux of this. We leave our kids in daycare to go to work, and the value chain is completely imbalanced. So when you make this your employer's problem, and it is, and they get it. So I think that we're in a very critical moment in time where parents, like, we have leverage and we have all the attention of our employers, our managers, and the C-level. Every CEO and every executive is extremely aware and worried about how are we going to get butts back in seats, right? Let's not also say it's the kindness of their hearts. Like, they're like, butts back in seats. So let's make it about that. One hot tip I would say is, if you have an employer that's, I don't know, like more than 200 or 300 employees, then you know all the parents in your company, create a critical mass of them in a very activist way. Call it a really nice name, like a parent employee resource group, which are groups that are sanctioned at every corporate. Like, that's nothing new. It's basically an affinity group. And I have seen companies that where parents form this parent ERG, and they basically form a list of demands, and they make noise as a collective, right? So there's not one person who's getting fired necessarily. And this is a collective list of demands, and you bring that to the executive team, and you literally get a meeting. You say, we need to have a meeting with the executive, every single executive in this company or whoever. Like, you need a real executive in that room though. And you present a list of demands, if you will. Top of that, and maybe you'll get 3 out of 10, maybe you get 1 out of 10. It's more than nothing. Top of that is ask for a childcare subsidy. So Kathryn, you're right. That is the quickest way, cash transfer, to have relief. And a lot of companies are thinking about it. So we've also seen surveys where companies are like, we're thinking about it. We need to tip them over the edge.
I totally just to piggyback on that, in the reporting that I've done, the collective, getting a group of women together and saying, this is not just one person complaining, this is a group that is like demanding change, is basically the most effective way in getting policy changes in your company.
Absolutely. I think a lot of parents, a lot of our moms are on parent ERGs. And so that's really, really great tip. I believe there was an article that Eve Rodsky, I think she's on the next panel or the one after, where she talks about, a lot of working moms are in ERG groups. And even if it's not a parent ERG group, even just a women in business ERG group, women collective ERG group, this is an opportunity to rally parents together, especially women, and really have your voices heard. Question for Sarah and probably Shadia as well. What are you guys, I know it's hard right now for employers. I get it. But when can we expect employers to start supporting working parents right now with childcare? We've had multiple discussions. You guys have been out there in the field trying to get employers to support working parents. What are you hearing in terms of adoption of some kind of support for working parents? What kind of solutions are you guys asking of these employers? Are you saying provide, 100% childcare, subsidized childcare, backup care? What are the solutions you're tabling, and when can we expect something? Because what's happening is a lot of parents are basically like, okay, is help not coming? What are we doing here? So just give us a very quick timeline on what has been happening in the last 6 months and what can we expect in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is that, there isn't one size fits all in this crisis. And so employers, what they were doing in the past, which is like, open a big on-site daycare center and offer that to our employees, or, give them 12 days of backup care in case their main child care falls through. Like, those are solutions of the past, and they won't work for today's, parent who's virtual schooling their kindergartner, or who's afraid to send their child back to childcare, or whose, nanny fell through because of COVID. And so employers need to rethink their childcare solutions kind of in light of the new situation that has come about. Parents no longer commuting into an office necessarily, so may need childcare closer to home. These are things that I think are going to force employers to be innovative, to revisit their benefits, before their annual agreements are up, or however often they look at these things, and move quickly and be adaptable to what families need now, which is pretty different than what they needed before.
And the good news at the high level, Sarah, is that, so like at the macro level, the man, the corporate, has identified this as a big business opportunity. So, hey, when you speak capitalism, you know, you get hurt as well. And so I can tell you that we, Kinside, and, you know, many other awesome family benefits companies, but Kinside, we are brokering a deal with an unnamed, very large insurance company, very large insurance company that just has access to millions of employees already, right, and millions of consumers. They're seeing this as a big business opportunity to sell into their employers. And so the good news is that at least there's a space that has been created for, there's not like where a social problem actually matches a business opportunity. And hopefully we're going to start to see, unfortunately, these things take a while, right? So it's months and months and the sales cycle is a bit long, and actually getting this out to market, like getting a widespread, and it's not just one vendor like Kinside, like you're going to need like 10 different vendors and solutions to really tackle this. But I believe that we're seeing a marketplace open where childcare is coming into the mainstream conversation as a real business opportunity and a business imperative for employers. It is no longer being seen as a perk. It is coming into the essential. And I think right now we're just feeling that transition. Unfortunately, every parent feels like no help is coming because it does take time. But I'm here to say that I do feel very hopeful about the future, that at least in the next year or so, we are going to see a lot of these supports coming into the mainstream and coming into the employer-based system in a more structural way.
Absolutely. I think great point, Shadia. I know that a lot of our moms are being squeezed, and so they're asking these questions. One of the questions that came from the audience is, what are some of the talking points when we go to, through our ERG, and we want to table this to an employer? And I'll have Sarah answer this. What are some of the, is there a one pager that your organization has put together? What tips do you have for that ERG, that mom that has basically, gone back to the ERG to say, hey, let's go back to our employer with this value propositions? What are some tips that you have? What are some of the talking points that they need to go in with? Is that data? Is that statistics? What are some of the things that they need to go in with without, seeming like, oh my goodness, we can't get anything done, so we need childcare. So I would love to hear more of a targeted response there that can really help these moms, go in with a strong value proposition.
Yeah, Shadia just wrote this in our private chat, and I also wrote this in an Inc. article that you got to survey the parents in your company, not just moms, dads too. Make the survey anonymous so that you collect real numbers, and don't just survey, what their problems are, but how it is impacting their work and their productivity, because this is what is going to speak to an employer. We found in our survey at Winnie, 1 in 4 families is attempting to have the work from home parent be the primary caregiver. This is unprecedented. So employers are paying for an employee to work and also caregive at the same time. Employers are not going to be happy about this. This has got to have a hit on productivity. And so come with the numbers to get their attention that this is actually impacting their own employees.
Absolutely. And there's a statistics, and we'll share it somewhere in the comments later on as well, around the impact on productivity and how it actually affects more moms than men. There's a whole bunch of strong statistics there that I think we can share as well. We're coming near to the end of this panel, and I want you all to give a very short response to just give us one final advice. Give moms one final advice around childcare in a way that supports them and their work. And I'll start with you, Kathryn.
Okay. I am allergic to advice because I feel like advice sometimes makes me feel like there's something wrong with mothers, when actually I think something's wrong with everybody else, and mothers are just doing just fine. I mean, mothers are doing so much, and I feel like we don't need to change. Everybody else needs to change. But I think that my takeaway that I'd like to offer is just like, I think that we need to be in a place of radical lowering of our own judgments of ourselves and others. And that honestly, that is more important than any like workaround, but like allowing ourselves just the reality of how unprecedentedly terrible this is, and just lowering what we're expecting of ourselves and other mothers, I think is just a really important part of this that it relates to childcare, and I think it relates to our whole mindset and how squeezed we feel. And I think in terms of making a business case, making an economic case, as Shadia was saying, is really important. And whatever you can do to present that this will help morale, I think it actually impacts people who are not parents, because they feel actually it creates anti-mom bias in the workplace, because they feel like they're picking up the slack because of people doing stuff. But I'll stop there. I think that money talks. And so whatever economic case you can make is really powerful.
Thank you. Nadia.
So I would say something similar, Kathryn. Give yourself permission. I would say, like, I gave myself permission to send my kids to preschool because I couldn't do it. And I'm a single mom. So I was like, well, give yourself permission to do whatever it is that you need to survive. And so it's just along the lines of like, I don't know, lower your expectation feels like wonk, 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 but give yourself permission to give the iPad to the child when you're going crazy. Give yourself permission to not spend all the time doing the activities that are the most fulfilling and robust and educational activities with your children. This is time to get through in our mental health. Like, put your oxygen mask on first, what I would say, before you pass it along.
Thank you. Sarah?
My advice is have more kids. Seriously, I think like this whole pandemic, the bright spot for me personally has been my new baby. My older kids are great too, but like it's just so nice. This is the first time I've actually been with a baby and not rushed back into the office. I've been nursing him, which is like unheard of for me. And I just hope that this, doesn't make families feel like they can't accommodate more children. It's been amazing. And I feel like, you stretch to take on the work that's required of you. There's really no better time than when you're stuck in a house to be pregnant and have a newborn. I'm sure maybe Kathryn feels differently with this. But I just, I want to make sure that we reflect the good as well. And, there's just something really wonderful about seeing, even despite all the awful stuff happening in the world right now and in our country, like I see my son kind of growing up every day by leaps and bounds, and that gives me hope for the future.
I love that. I love that. As scary as it sounds, to go ahead and have another baby, I really do love that. I think definitely find the silver lining, wherever that may be, whether it's spending more time with your spouse or spending more time with your kids or just having more time for your family. Really do appreciate this wonderful panel for taking the time to pour your knowledge and your experiences into this particular summit.